This video is sponsored by NordVPN, but more on them later. Hey, what's going on? Today I wanted to talk about my studio and kind of where it's at right now. Of course, my studio is forever changing, but a mindset shift I had recently was understanding that one studio, in this case, this studio, doesn't necessarily have to fit all purposes. For a while, I was trying to achieve that, and I realized it didn't really achieve any purpose 100%. It was okay at doing most things, but it wasn't really good at doing any specific thing, which of course led to a lot of speed bumps and workflow issues and annoyances that showed up along the way. So for this studio, this specific setup here, I have it tailored to a specific goal, which includes making music that is easily editable, sounds clean relative to most of my other works, and has the same core sound to the tracks. And another thing that was kind of important to me was to have room for exploration and experimentation with loops like samples and of course some modular stuff. But those two last things aren't always necessary. And when I mention the same core sound to most of my tracks, that really comes from having a consistent use of the same synthesizers. Sure, I can select different patches, but they overall have the same vibe or sound or tone to them. So let's get into what those are, and we'll start right here on my main desk. So on the tabletop, right above the keyboard and mouse, I have the Novation Peak. And yes, I do work there, but I would own the synth even if I didn't. I use this synth mainly for a lot of filler sounds at the end of making a track, as well as the majority of my pads and my chords when making music. And even though it's right here, dead center, right in front of my keyboard, I don't always use it first. What usually comes first is exploring samples and chopping things up here on the, you guessed it, Octatrack. Here's the thing though, and even then, I say this comes first. I don't always use loopy samples or chop samples in these types of tracks. I'd say probably for the past month and a half-ish, maybe 2 months, I brought the Octatrack back out and really missed it. And it's really fun to use, but I don't always use it in all my tracks. I don't always need to use everything that is out, especially when it comes to finding new rhythms within rhythms. I love the Octatrack, especially using the slider, as well as different things like the different loop points or the slice grid. The OT mainly handles drum breaks or just weird textures that I can loop at different lengths quickly and in an almost performative way to kind of have a human touch to them. I also mentioned how this space has room for modular exploration. I do keep the palette case right here next to me or over here on table number 2, which I'll get to after we finish up here. But as always, I love the palette case. I've talked about it a ton, and I just got this Osiris voice. If you haven't seen this video already, it is easily one of my favorite voices now, and honestly, probably one of my favorite modules of 2021. I mean, mainly because it's just so usable and useful at the same time, useful. Especially with the music that I'm trying to write and the way I like to write my music. So yeah, check that video out if you haven't seen it already. Now onto this keyboard tray rollout. Y'all have probably seen this keyboard once or twice before in some other videos, but this thing is a workhorse. I use it so freaking much, and I've been using it more and more the more I get used to playing the piano and the more I kind of learn about playing the piano. And that's going to be this here, the Nord Electro 6D. This keyboard, I kind of bought it randomly, saw it in a video once, and I was like, oh, that sounds cool. But it just has so many amazing electric pianos, strings, organs, just organic sounds that sound incredible and play extremely dynamically, which I didn't realize was so important until I got this thing. Furthermore, the keyboard itself feels incredible. It's a 61 key semi-weighted waterfall style keyboard, so that the lower notes require a bit more velocity to them, a bit more oomph when playing them versus the higher notes, which is kind of cool. And basically, I like this keyboard so much, I took the USB out of this, run it into my Mac, and I use it to play other synthesizers once in a while, or on the rare occasion, a plugin. So yeah, that's my Nord Electro 6D. Absolutely love this thing. Next to that, tried and true, needs no introduction, the Electron Digitact, as y'all have seen before. I've talked about this thing a billion times. I still think it's one of the best bang for buck drum machines that you can get, mainly because of overbridge And remember how at the beginning of this entire chat, I mentioned that in this current studio setup, I really like, or I'm looking for clean audio as well as easily editable sessions. That's where Overbridge comes in, because with my my setup inside Ableton Live, like my default template, I have all 8 tracks plus the left and right master output of the DT all in their own channels, and that whole setup is in its own group. That way I can just hit record a 2-bar loop or maybe a 4-bar loop, and then just arrange it later in the DAW. Or if I wanted, I can just hit record and perform the whole thing in and fix any of my mistakes in post. So it's incredible. I will say though that this DT honestly gets swapped out back and forth with push 2. And if I'm not using the Digitact for my drums, I'm using push 2 and drum rack. But the reason I'm not using push 2 right now is because I wanted to mess around with a lot of the parameter locking and the sample manipulation that the Digitact kind of offers, just built in right on the face of the unit. And sure, you can do a lot of this stuff or get close to it on push 2, but I mean, for me at least, it just takes a bit more. It just takes a bit more time for me to set it up, and I just kind of want to hit record and go. I guess another random shout out would be this thing that's turned off right now. It's the Roland JV 1080. I don't use it as much anymore, but if you listen to any of my older tunes, it was on a lot of them. And I'll use it once in a while for that weird, like borderline cheesy sound, if that's what I'm looking for. It's very rare that I want that sound, so the thing usually just stays off and it's just racked up. So that covers my main desk. And by the way, the desk itself is called the Output Platform Desk. I have a review of it here as well in case you're interested. But the TLDR of that video is, would I buy it again? No. Do I hate it? No. Am I happy with it? Yes. And do I plan on getting rid of it? No. So yeah, if you want more info on that, just check that there. And if you're wondering about my actual mechanical keyboard here, it's the Keychron K2. Thank you to one of my best friends for gifting it to me. This, I absolutely love it. It's awesome. Could be wired, could be wireless, has a built-in battery. I got a link to it down in the description below in case you're curious about that. And then I was using a mouse for a while. I tried so many different ergonomic things, but I ended up with this, which I might be saying the name wrong, is the Apple Magic Trackpad. This thing's pretty tight because the one thing I really like is within Ableton Live, I can zoom in and zoom out kind of like an iPad. And it comes with a lot of the other, man, this thing is dirty. It comes with a lot of the other gestures that I'm just so used to doing that I also can't do on a regular mouse. Because a lot of this is kind of habit from using my MacBook laptop that has a trackpad. So I know all the 4 fingers up, 3 fingers down types of things. So this is actually more useful than I realized. Now, I want to get into table 2, where I swap a lot of things out, and I want to talk about my audio routing as well as my MIDI setup. But before that, I do want to give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor, NordVPN. In line with most of my sponsorships, I love bringing something to you that I actually use that you will get a major discount on. Now, I know this might sound super random to be here on this channel, but I know for a fact that you have a device that connects to the internet. How do I know this? Because, hello from the World Wide Web. I've been using NordVPN since 2019 and I absolutely love it. What's a VPN, you might ask? TLDR, it's a way for your computer to connect to the internet through a couple different servers that disguise or hide your computer from companies trying to track you for like ads or those cookies that you always hear about or anything like that. NordVPN happens to have over 5,100 servers in 60 different countries so that you'll be good to go. And I know you're not doing anything illegal, but I'm a big advocate of personal privacy online as well as transparency on where our data goes and what our data is used for. Some might say I've gone off a bit on the deep end. I'm kidding. But in all seriousness, NordVPN is a simple and easy way for you to finally get back some of your privacy while online and not have a ton of corporations try to sell you things on the back end of your browsing. It's especially useful when your significant other or your mom or dad asks you to search for something that you would otherwise never search for, and now they won't stop trying to get you to buy, I don't know, crocheted oversized frogs with purple yarn or something else insane. Another useful tip with NordVPN would be to connect to a different country to access shows or discounts on products that don't exist where you're currently at. It's super easy to use with a one-click option to connect, or you could be like me and enable an auto connect for zero-click protection. And if you're worried about your internet speeds, I personally can say I've noticed no effects on my speeds whatsoever while uploading videos or playing games online, or even just regular browsing or even watching TV shows. And lastly, with one account, you can have up to 6 devices connected to it. NordVPN is also supported on every major platform from Windows, Android, iOS, macOS, and even Linux. Even your Android TV can support NordVPN. So if NordVPN is something you're interested in, go to nordvpn.com/Ricky Tinez to get a 2-year plan plus 1 additional month at a mega discount. All right, on to table 2. So table 2 is honestly barely a table. It's a piece of wood on a triple keyboard stand, and it's beyond sketchy, but it's lasted me so far. So I'm just hoping it continues to last to at least the end of this sentence. How crazy would that be if this actually broke when I said that? On the top of this sketchy thing, I have the Pro 3, tried and true, total workhorse synth. And this kind of goes back to the original point of this studio, which is kind of having that core fundamental sound. I use this on basically everything. You can check out this video here. I use the same patch on pretty much all my tracks. And with that patch, I'll just track it in as I go. Once I'm done there, maybe I'll explore through some of the presets. But the Pro 3 is just such a fun synth to design on and to design sounds on that I usually just start with an initialized patch, which I finally learned is down and latch. Under that, I have this here, which is the the Launchpad Pro. And again, I work at Novation, and I have this because I work there, but it has been becoming more and more useful to me because whenever I'm writing that cool bass line up here and I'm afraid that I'm going to forget the notes or where the notes are, I can jump onto the Launchpad Pro, hit record arm, choose a new empty track, and once I'm ready there, I just hit record from here, and I don't have to like octopus arm across my studio and hope that I'm gonna hit the thing and the notes and everything. It just becomes a mess. I just have it right here. Next to this, of course, I have this, which is kind of comes to like a swappy section. This is the Avalon bassline, which I've been in a love and hate relationship, mainly because it sounds really good, but it doesn't do much other than what it was built to do. And I'm kind of just not feeling, I guess I'm just not feeling that sound right now. So I used it a ton in the past, but I think I just kind of need to give it a break. And I was giving it a break. I just brought it out maybe like a week ago. So this section here is kind of like my swap experiment section. I've also talked about this before in this video here. And I find that it's super important to have in a studio. And in that video, I had it over here, but I recently moved it over to this side because this is also where I'm kind of changing a lot of my guitar pedals that I run sounds from either Ableton Live through these pedals or through or any synths that are here on this desk like the Pro 3 or the Avalon. I'll run them through here. When it comes to my guitar pedals, I just picked up the Shallow Water. It's incredible. I've tried the Dot Chaser and I wanted to get the Cooper Effects one, but it's astronomically expensive right now. So I ended up with the Shallow Water and I could not be happier. This was heavily influenced by Ura Music or Aura Music. If you haven't seen any of their videos, please go do yourself a favor and check them out after this one. I, of course, have a link down in the description below the like button. Next to that, I'm checking out this reverb pedal by Empress. Just got it not too long ago. Not very familiar with it, but so far so good. And then next to that, right now, I currently have the Eventide Triceratops. Again, I did a video on this and why I love it so much right here. All of these pedals are powered by the Eventide Power Max. I recently ran into some weird issues. Well, I guess they're not that weird. They're kind of common. I ran into some common issues where I was getting a lot of hum and buzz from my pedals, and I realized it was coming from a cheap power supply I got off of Amazon. So maybe me, I reached out to Eventide. They responded to me the quickest, of course, and I asked, hey, do you have any suggestions on power supplies outside of the ones that you make? And I didn't realize that they have one of the best power supplies for pedals, duh. So they sent this over, the Power Max, and it's been incredible. No complaints. So this whole section here changes the most, mainly the pedals and mainly the Avalon. Sometimes the Avalon becomes, I don't know, an SP404. Sometimes the SP404 becomes a Nord drum. And sometimes, you know, any synth, sometimes it just becomes more pedals. That's really it. So yeah, that's table 2. Let's move on to audio routing and MIDI stuff. Moving on to audio and MIDI routing, I'm still using this Thunderbolt version of the Focusrite Claret 8 Pre. Again, not to sound like a broken record, I work at Novation, which is owned by Focusrite, but I would own this thing even if I didn't work there. And I actually own this one because I bought this one. Under that, I'm running the Octapre Mark II Dynamic by Focusrite as well. It's an additional 8 mic pre's, and I really like the dynamic version of Focusrite mic pre's, mainly because they have built-in compressors on each channel, and they sound really good. And this is also being ran over ADAT, ADAT, optical, whatever you want to call it. Under that rack, this is just a 3U space. I have, of course, my patch bay where everything gets routed back in and out for the most part. But right now, as you can see, it's kind of empty because everything in here is pretty standard. I don't have to patch too many things unless it's effects. And you might not have noticed, but on table 2, I actually have a patch bay for my patch bay. That way I don't have to run cables across my whole studio, aka just this little table. I can just patch them right there on the table. And when it comes to MIDI stuff, for notes, I try to keep everything over USB, but anything that is sequencer related, I of course am still using the ERM multi-clock, which I love. And I've tried to debunk it a ton of times, as you've seen in probably some of my other videos, and I still love it to death, still use it all the time, but I don't suggest it to anyone, only because I get a ton of questions back on how the hell do you make it work, and it took me way too long of a time to figure out how to make it work, and it's impossible for me to explain that over an email. And I've even tried to do a video on how I did it before, but honestly, that's pretty much it. I spent a ton of time in here making very similar sounding music, and I think that is very important, which is having a goal on the type of music you actually want to make with your studio. That is like half the battle when it comes to making a good studio that will work for you. So yeah, if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I'll try to answer them on the day of this video, as well as, you know, the following weeks and whenever I can get to it. And of course, if you are a part of that A Simple Thanks YouTube membership thing I got going on down below, I check those comments pretty regularly, and I seriously, crazy that I just put that thing up and some people joined. I seriously appreciate everyone who is a part of that. It really means a lot. All right, that's it for me. Hope to see you again next week, and yeah, thanks for coming by. Until then, you already know the drill. Share the love, share the knowledge. Knowledge is power. Peace.